The evening air was thick with the scent of rain, the streets still glistening under the dim glow of streetlights. Officer Daniels had just pulled into his usual patrol spot outside the local diner when he heard the sound. Small, hurried footsteps slapping against the wet pavement. He turned his head just in time to see a little boy, no older than 6 or 7, sprinting toward him. Tears streamed down the boy's face, his tiny chest heaving as he struggled to catch his breath. His clothes were soaked, his little hands trembling. But it wasn't the tears or the panic in his eyes that made Officer Daniels' stomach drop. It was the boy's shirt. A cold wave of dread washed over him. The fabric, once light-colored, was stained with something dark, something that made every instinct in his body scream that something was terribly wrong. The officer crouched down, his voice gentle but firm. "Hey, buddy, what happened? Are you hurt?" The boy didn't answer at first. His lips quivered, his eyes darting back toward the street he had just come from, as if afraid something, or someone, might still be following him. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he choked out the words that sent an icy chill down the officer's spine. "It's not mine." Officer Daniels swallowed hard, his pulse quickening. The night had just taken a turn he wasn't prepared for, and neither was he ready for what the boy would say next. Officer Daniels felt a chill run down his spine as the boy's shaky words hung in the air. "It's not mine." The officer glanced down at the stained shirt again, his mind racing. Blood? Paint? Something else? Whatever it was, the boy's terrified expression made one thing clear. Something awful had happened. Keeping his voice calm, Daniels placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "Okay, buddy. You're safe now. Can you tell me your name?" The boy hesitated, his small fingers clenching the fabric of his soaked shorts. "Ethan," he finally stammered. His voice was barely above a whisper. Daniels nodded. "All right. Ethan, can you tell me where you came from? Who's with you?" The boy's gaze flickered back toward the street, his whole body trembling as if he was afraid to even speak. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he choked out, "My mom." Daniels felt his chest tighten. He glanced toward the dimly lit road Ethan had come from. There was no sign of anyone else. Just the quiet hum of the city at night, the occasional passing car splashing through puddles. If his mother was out there, why wasn't she running after him? Daniels pressed the radio clipped to his shoulder. "Dispatch, I've got a child, approximately 6 or 7 years old. Name's Ethan, found alone near Pine and West. Requesting backup and medical support." The radio crackled. "Copy that, Unit 12. Do you have a guardian on scene?" Daniels's grip on the radio tightened as he watched the boy's lip quiver. "Negative. Child appears distressed. Possible situation involving a guardian. Stand by." Ethan sniffled, rubbing his nose with the back of his sleeve. She told me to run," he whispered. A heavy silence fell between them. Daniels felt his heart pound. "Why, Ethan?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. Ethan's tiny hands gripped, his own arms as he squeezed himself tight. "Because..." His voice broke, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. "Because he came back." Daniel's jaw tensed. He didn't have to ask who he was. He had seen this pattern before. A mother trying to protect her child. A child too young to understand the full weight of the danger but old enough to know when something was wrong. Daniels glanced back toward the street, his instincts now on high alert. If the boy had been told to run, that meant his mother had stayed behind. And if she had stayed behind. Sirens sounded in the distance. Ethan flinched at the noise, his hands clamping over his ears. Daniels gave his shoulder a light squeeze. "It's okay, kiddo. Help is coming." But as he turned his gaze back toward the darkened streets, a gnawing dread settled in his stomach. Would it be soon enough? Would you like the story to continue with more perspectives? like Ethan's mother or someone else involved? Let me know how you'd like it to unfold. The sirens grew louder, their wailing echoing off the buildings. Ethan clung to Officer Daniels' sleeve, his small body still shaking. Daniels kept his eyes on the darkened street, his pulse quickening. If someone was out there, if he was out there, they were running out of time. A police cruiser pulled up, its lights flashing red and blue across the wet pavement. Another officer, Ramirez, stepped out, scanning the scene with sharp eyes. "What do we got?" he asked. Daniels kept his voice low, careful not to startle Ethan. "Mom told him to run. He says someone came back." Ramirez's jaw tightened. No more words needed to be exchanged. They knew what this meant. Daniels turned back to Ethan, crouching, so their eyes met. "Ethan, buddy, do you know where your mom is right now?" Ethan nodded hesitantly. He turned and pointed toward a narrow alley just down the block. Daniels felt a cold dread settle in his chest. If his mother was there? If she was still there, she might need help. "Ramirez, take the kid," Daniels said, already moving toward the alley. "No!" Ethan's fingers clutched at Daniels' sleeve. "Don't leave her!" His voice cracked with fear, fresh tears welling in his eyes. Daniels paused, his heart aching for the little boy. "I promise. I'm going to help her," he said softly. "Stay with Officer Ramirez, okay?" Ethan hesitated, then slowly let go. With his hand on his holster, Daniels made his way toward the alley, his footsteps silent on the wet pavement. The streetlights barely reached past the entrance, leaving most of the passage in deep shadow. He strained his ears, listening, waiting. Then he heard it. A soft, ragged breath. Daniels took another step forward, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. There. Woman, collapsed against the brick wall, her arms wrapped around her middle, her breathing shallow. Her face was bruised, her hair clinging to her damp skin. "Ma'am," Daniels said, kneeling beside her, "can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered open, dazed but searching. "Ethan," she whispered. "He's safe," Daniels assured her. "Help is on the way. Can you tell me what happened?" Her lips trembled, but she forced the words out. He wasn't supposed to find us." Daniels felt a surge of anger rise in his chest. He had seen cases like this before, women and children trying to escape, trying to rebuild their lives, only to be dragged back into fear. A distant rustling sound made him snap his head up. Someone was there, watching. Daniels rose to his feet, every muscle in his body tensed. "NYPD!" he called out, his voice firm. "Step out where I can see you!" Silence. Then, footsteps, quick, fading. Daniels took a step forward, but by the time he reached the end of the alley, whoever had been there was gone. The sound of more sirens filled the air. Ambulances, backup, help had arrived. Daniels turned. Back, watching as medics carefully helped Ethan's mother onto a stretcher. Ramirez walked over, Ethan clinging to his hand. The moment Ethan saw his mother, he broke free, running straight to her. "Mom!" Tears streamed down her face as she reached for him. "Baby," she whispered, holding him close. Daniels exhaled, the tension in his chest easing just a little. Tonight could have ended differently, but it didn't, because Ethan ran, because his mother fought to protect him, because help arrived in time. As the ambulance doors closed, Ethan peeked out, his wide eyes locking onto Daniels. For the first time that night, there was something new in his gaze. Relief. Hope. Daniels gave him a small nod. The ambulance pulled. Away, its lights glowing in the distance. Daniels stood there for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the city around him. Then, with one last glance at the alley, he turned back toward his patrol car. Another call would come soon. Another life to protect. But tonight, Ethan and his mother had a second chance, and that was enough.